It's now my great pleasure to introduce Heidi Clarke. Heidi, as you will know if you've seen the website and her potted biography on that, has had a varied career, both in England and here in Northern Ireland. She's worked on everything from organising volunteer bin lorry drivers during the pandemic, through to being project manager for the Open Golf Tournament. So she has a wide range of experience, but she's currently senior advisor with the Strategic Investment Board, where she's responsible for working with the Department for the Economy on the development of a green economy, and in particular, the circular economy. So please give a warm welcome to Heidi Clarke.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brett, for that warm welcome. It is lovely to be with you, and I'm so glad that there's bums on the seats because we weren't sure with the weather. So it's lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me along. So I just thought Brett's given a good introduction to me, but I just wanted to give you a bit more background info on me, and I guess why I'm so passionate about what I am passionate about. So by way of background, there we go. I was brought up in Cumber by two very resource efficient parents. I've got an ice cream tub on the slide, as if you went into our garage growing up, you could have found a lot of these, a lot of Quality Street tins, a lot of Roses tins, and you would never know what was in them. Screws, nails, who knew? Because if my parents thought that something had a use, they would keep it in use. The same as if you went to the freezer, you could get chili, you could get soup. You'd be really lucky if you got ice cream in an ice cream container, because there were so many ice cream containers being used for other things, because my parents just thought, this has a purpose, there's no point in throwing it out. So that's a wee bit of my background. I also lived in the southwest of England, in North Devon, for a number of years, and that's really when I fell in love with the environment. I spent lots of time in the sea, lots of time hiking, camping, and I just loved what nature gave us back, just the peace and the tranquility, and just having a different perspective when you spend time in nature. And then as Brett said, I also worked, a lot of my career spent in the planning profession, and then I've moved into this circular economy space where I'm supporting the Department for the Economy. And in all honesty, I would say that I feel like I've found my sweet spot. I feel like I've found something that I'm really passionate about, that I can imagine working in this space for a long time. And this is my camper van. I've done a lot of travelling around in it, lots of ice cream containers in my camper van, filled with lots of different things, exploring the wild Atlantic Way. But tonight, I'm really here to talk to you about our resources. And when I say resources, I mean stuff. I mean components that are in our phones, in our laptops. I mean the materials that goes into the production of our cars, everything that we're dependent on, the seats that we're sitting on. There's resources within them, and I just want to, when I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about all of those things. And as you can see on the right hand side, there's a man eating away at the earth and its resources, and that's kind of us. You know, since 1970. Our population has doubled, and our GDP has grown fourfold. But that comes at a cost to the Earth's resources. We're eating up lots and lots of the Earth's resources. And I'm stating the obvious, but sometimes we don't act like it. We only have one planet. The graphic on the left-hand side just shows how different countries are consuming resources at very different rates. So on the far left, you've got America. It's not that surprisingly, but if every country was consuming resources at the rate that America currently is, we would require 5 Earths worth of resources. You've got less developed countries, Indonesia at the end, just consuming slightly over 1 Earth's worth of resources, and then you've got us sort of in the middle. And if everybody in the world was demanding the same level of resources as what we are in the UK, we would need over 2.5 Earth's worth of resources. So as I said, I'm stating the obvious, but we only have one, so we have to be a lot kinder to it than what we currently are. This is a really interesting piece of research. It is called Earth Overshoot Day, And it really looks at recognising the Earth does have an ability to regenerate its resources. We see that in nature, in the seasons, as the year goes on. But this is looking at the Earth's ability to regenerate its resources in comparison to our demand for resources. And it then marks a point in the year where our demand for the Earth's ecological resources has exceeded and overshot what the Earth can regenerate in a year. And from looking at the graphic, you can see back in 1970, Earth Overshoot Day was in December. Interestingly, in 2020, during the pandemic, Earth Overshoot Day was, I think that was around August. So there was a little bit of a reprieve, but in 2020, our Earth Overshoot Day is the 28th of July. So all of this kind of demand for resources and the way we produce and consume our resources is causing this triple planetary crisis. It's raising the temperature. Global temperature is causing climate change. We're stealing lots of land sort of from natural processes, causing biodiversity loss, and then pollution as well. And these are really unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. And Goal 12 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal is to address that, is to create more responsible patterns of production and consumption. And that's really where the circular economy comes in and plays its part, because it is all about creating more responsible, not saying we're not going to produce, not going to consume, but we're going to do it more responsibly. So just before we get into what the circular economy is, I just want to get a wee show of hands. Who would say they're familiar with the concept? I know you are. Yeah. I would be really annoyed if you weren't, Brett. Okay, well, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll all be a bit more familiar with it. And in all honesty, 5 years ago, I wasn't familiar with the concept at all. So it's been a journey. So we're currently, as I've been saying, we're taking resources from the Earth, we're using them to produce stuff, to consume stuff, quite often for a very short period of time, quite often as single-use items, and then we're throwing it away. And in contrast to that, the circular economy really looks at resources very, very differently. It seeks to reduce our overall demand for resources by keeping materials and components in use for as long as possible at their highest value. So it looks to create value from resources rather than disposing of them. And it's based on 3 very simple principles. Designing out waste, so we design things differently with the long term in mind. We design them with less resources in the first place. Designing out waste and pollution. We seek to keep the stuff in use through repair, through remanufacturing, through recycling, albeit a lot of the value of the resource is lost at that point. And then the third principle is we look to put good stuff back into the earth, particularly with our natural resources. There's a lot of we can regenerate the earth's ecosystems by actually considering how we can put stuff back into it. And this concept of the circular economy has gained a lot of traction globally because it is seen as a really key tool in tackling climate change. So we're just going to consider what its role is now in tackling climate change. A lot of what we have done to date is look to just decarbonise our energy system, but if you think about it, it's no good producing all the same stuff that we do and consuming, but just powering it by green energy. We really need to look at how we're producing things and how we're consuming things. So I've got just a short video here to show you. It's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and they're global leaders really in the circular economy space. And I think Ellen MacArthur will do a better job than me at telling you how the circular economy can help us tackle climate change.
Climate change is a result of our take, make, waste economy. And until now, we've looked at solving climate change largely by switching to renewable energy. We're replacing fossil fuels with wind and solar power at speed all over the world. But the truth is that the energy transition will only solve half the climate problem. It's like we've been reading only half the book, like we've been watching only half the movie. So what completes the picture? Transforming how industry uses materials and how we manage land. That is, transitioning to a circular economy. It's more than energy. It's about transformation. What does that mean? It means we address things before they become a problem and design out emissions before production even begins. We build an economy that eliminates waste and pollution, keeps products and materials in use, and regenerates natural systems. The circular economy can help address climate change by reducing emissions from industry, land use, and agriculture. So how do we make this transition? By businesses embedding the circular economy in their climate strategies and redesigning products and services. By governments setting enabling policies and putting the necessary infrastructure in place. By investors mobilizing capital towards circular economy solutions.
The circular economy plays a really key role in solving many of the problems around climate change. But what it also does is it builds a more resilient economy.
A complete picture of a thriving, zero-emissions economy is coming into focus. The mission now is to make it a reality.
So that's a bit about how the circular economy can help at global scale. I want to just think now about how the circular economy and that mindset and attitude towards resources can help Northern Ireland reduce our emissions. I'm not sure if many of you picked up on the news. It was actually on the news in Farmers Weekly whenever I was driving in. But the Climate Change Commission, who they advise the UK government on how we should be trying to achieve net zero by 2050. And they advise government on what is achievable and what level of reduction is required in emissions across different sectors. And then they also advise on how we should be going about that, what they give us recommendations basically to try to reduce those emissions. So in Northern Ireland, we set a really ambitious target of reaching net zero and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 100% from baseline of 1990 levels, which the Climate Change Commission is advising us that's very unlikely. That's a bit too ambitious for Northern Ireland. But in any way, take that aside. I just want kind of to open a question up. So in their recommendations to Northern Ireland's executive on how we should be reducing our emissions, I just kind of want to gauge what level of reduction do you think they had advised was necessary for businesses? So we have two options here. Did the Climate Change Commission recommend or advise that we should be reducing emissions from our businesses by A, 26% or B, 46%? And they're saying we need to reduce our emissions for businesses by 2030 in order for us to be anywhere near on track to net zero. So we raise a hand if you think it's A, they're recommending that we reduce our emissions by 26%. Or B, they had recommended we reduce our emissions by 46%. Yeah. That's a lot. That's asking businesses to reduce their emissions by half in the next 7 years.
How do you define what net zero is?
Basically producing no more greenhouse gas emissions than what we were in 20 on balance from 1990. But that means that there's a big part to play in capturing emissions. It's not just reducing the amount of ones produced, because it's a balance of the 1990.
Yeah, you're taking
Yeah, that's a baseline. I'm totally not a carbon expert at all on this, so I might not be able to answer all of your questions if they're carbon related. So to me, that was just staggering. That's a lot to do in the next 7 years. But what I found was really interesting in the same report, they also advised how we should be going about that. And obviously, energy efficiency and switching to renewable energies is a really key part, but they've also recognised the need for better resource efficiency for us to increase our efficiency of our resource use. So that to me is where the circular economy plays a part, because it's all about rethinking our attitude and our relationship with resources. And I just wanted to share some other research that I had found, because we're trying to put the circular economy sort of on the agenda of net zero and help people to understand how it's going to play a really important part. And there was this research published by the Green Alliance in a report called Less In, More Out. And they have done calculations of what impact resource efficiencies could make within these sectors of construction, vehicles, food, drink, electronics and textiles. And they're saying if we improve our resource efficiencies in those areas, we could reduce nearly 200 metric tonnes of CO2 equivalent. That meant nothing to me, in all honesty, when I was reading it. So I did a bit more to understand what would 200 metric tonnes of CO2 equivalent look like, and found that a number of other government initiatives that they have done, you could see what impact did that have on carbon emissions. So the installation of lots of smart meters in homes reduced 28 metric tonnes. The whole of the UK renewable heat incentive scheme reduced 75 metric tonnes of emissions. And then there was changes to the building regulations requiring all new buildings to be made more energy efficient, and that reduced 196 metric tonnes, which obviously made a massive contribution. But my point was just, isn't that crazy? It can make such a difference if we are more efficient with our resources. And I just thought it'd be useful to look at, what does resource efficiency look like for businesses? Well, it looks like them utilising smart technologies to make the same products, but with a lot less virgin materials. It's where businesses can look to design stuff so that it lasts for longer, so we don't need to repair or replace our phone every 2 years, but they last for longer. It looks at substituting high carbon materials with less carbon resource efficient materials. That could be replacing steel with aluminium in construction. Businesses could also look at offering their products as a service, like Siemens Light, that you can now rent lights as opposed to owning lights, especially in business premises. It could look like businesses starting to use a lot of recycled content, and that we will see more of recycled plastics certainly in products as a result of changing legislation. It could also look like businesses using industrial symbiosis, which is a mouthful, but it basically is where the byproducts or the waste of one company can be utilised as a useful resource in another company. And one example, which I just heard about today, I read about it on LinkedIn, was a leisure centre in Devon have heated their swimming pools with the heat that was created from a data centre. So that is, the heat from that data centre is going to waste, has been able to be processed in some way to heat the swimming pools. And when there's a lot of leisure centres closing because they can't afford to pay their heating bills, I thought that was a really great example. So where are we now in Northern Ireland? Well, as part of the work I've been involved in, we commissioned a study to be done by a global consultancy called Circle Economy, and they produced this report called a Circularity Gap Report, and it kind of gave us some really good evidence base to develop the draft Circular Economy strategy. A couple of things that it told us. No surprise, we are using a disproportionate amount of resources given the size of our country. It calculated our material footprint, which is basically the amount of resources that are extracted from the earth, either here or elsewhere, and imported into Northern Ireland to meet, to satisfy our demands for goods and services, whether that be in construction materials required to build schools, hospitals, or transportation. So it did this calculation of our material footprint for Northern Ireland as a whole, divided it by our population, and then that gave us our material footprint per person per year in Northern Ireland. So currently our material footprint is 16.6 tonnes per person per year. Of resources, of material. No. This is just looking at material footprint. Yeah. So in the UK, the material footprint is 18.5 tonnes per person. In Scotland, it's 21.7 tonnes per person, which is probably because of the extractive industries in Scotland. But to give this context, the UN recommend that we should be, to live sustainably, we should be using between 6 to 8 tonnes of resources per person per year. So we've quite a way to go to become more sustainable. The report also picked up, which not hugely surprising, that the most material intensive, both from a material perspective and a carbon perspective, the most intensive sectors were agriculture and construction. The report also did a calculation called the circularity metric, which really looked at, out of all of the resources we are using, what level of that is coming from secondary materials that's already been in the system, rather than relying on virgin materials. So another question for you, from the calculation that they did, how much of our material do you think is being circulated back into our system? i.e., what level of materials is secondary and not virgin materials? Is it A, 8%, raise your hand, or B, 28%? Have you all done your homework? It is, it's 7.9%, so it's more or less 8%. So that means that we are, rounded up, 90% reliant on virgin materials. Scotland's material circularity metric was 1.3, so they're even worse than us, and the global average is 8.6. So given there's some stats that advise us we have like less than 100 years worth of certain resources from the earth, like oil, we need to get obviously better at using the stuff that we've already taken from the ground. So I don't know, some of that maybe seems a bit macro, not very relevant to your day to day. So I've got 2 deep dives we're going to take into things that definitely affect our daily lives. That's food and clothing. So we'll start off with food. In the UK, households are throwing away 4.5 tonnes of food, and what's crazy is that is food that's perfectly fine for eating. So it's a lot of waste being thrown away, and a lot of that is down to how we've processed it, how we decide to cook it, in the preparation of it, or we serve too much. And if there's one thing I would love to introduce in Northern Ireland in the next 10 years, I would love it, is portion sizes within restaurants. The amount of times I go out for dinner with my mum or my partner's nan, and they really don't want a proper big plate of food, because actually it turns you from eating your food, having a big plate of food served to you, that you could ask for a small portion of it, and then that would help us throw away a lot less, certainly from the hospitality sector anyway. And then in Northern Ireland, most of us should have a food caddy, a little food bin. You maybe keep it under your sink, or it maybe goes into your green big bin. But in our black bins, from sampling that councils have done across Northern Ireland, 25% of the weight of our black bins is actually made up of food waste. Yeah. That food waste has an impact on our environment, because if it goes into your black bin, it quite often ends up in landfill. And if we send just 1 kilogram of food waste to landfill, it is actually the same environmental impact as sending 25,000 plastic bottles to landfill, because of the methane gases which is a really damaging greenhouse gas that is emitted from when food waste starts to decompose. So it has a massive impact, but we're doing a lot to tackle this. This is a brilliant programme that is led by RAP, called it's Waste Resources Action Plan, and they are working closely with the hospitality sector, empowering the hospitality sector to be guardians of grub, to make sure that in the preparation and the cooking of food, that less and less of it goes to waste. There's also a lot of great work being done by FairShare. You may or may not be familiar. They collect a lot of food that supermarkets aren't selling, take it from the supermarket and then redistribute it to charities, who then quite often cook it up and serve it as meals after school clubs or other community groups. And in the process, a lot of people are being trained up in how to cook the food and learning new skills. So it's great. Another area of work that we're looking at is the simplification of labels on food. If you open your fridge, you pick out a product and it might have a display until, a best before until, and a use by. And that's really confusing, because people quite often look at whatever's the earliest date, and if today's past that date, it then goes in the bin. So we want to simplify that with just only put a date on food that would really cause harm if ate past that date, just to make it simpler for people. So what can you do? These are some of my suggestions. It sounds very simple, but if we all did it, we probably wouldn't be sending 4.5 million tonnes of food waste to landfill. So don't buy what we don't need. Let's plan ahead. I find that really hard, because sometimes I don't know whether I'm going to be in Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday night. So sometimes I'll just go and buy food for the night that I need. Do the sniff test, and don't rely on the best before dates. If it smells off, it probably is. If it's not, it might be fine for eating. And be creative. Look up BBC Good Food is really good at giving you ideas of what you could cook up with your leftovers. And a big takeaway, don't put your food waste in your black bin. Make sure that it goes in your food caddy. So our other deep dive this evening is going to be into clothing. We all buy our clothing, sometimes not fully aware of the full environmental impact of it. Often our clothing is produced via very long supply chains. The environmental impacts from it could be the usage of water in dyeing fabrics, and cleaning fabrics. There's a lot of chemicals and plastic microfibers that go into certain clothing, particularly probably sports clothing, and quite often that can end up as pollution in our water courses. There's a social impact associated with the clothes, especially clothes that is made in developing countries where perhaps people aren't working in a very comfortable working environment, or aren't being paid very fairly. And there's a really good app called Good On You, and it because it's confusing. You don't how do you know the environmental impact of one garment of clothing? Quite often we don't, but this app you can look up the brands that you normally buy from, and it has rated them, looking at all of those environmental factors and the human factors of how people are being treated or how people are being paid. So Good On You is a good resource to go to. And just some stats on waste. Apparently, and this is probably true for me, 30% of the clothes in my wardrobe I haven't worn, and I could do with a clear out for sure. And we're sending a lot of clothing to landfill, and the value of that is £140 million worth, which is again crazy when there's other people that can't clothe themselves. So there's a number of new business models emerging in response to tackle fast fashion, and I'm sure some of you are aware of different ones, but I want to show you a video of a local business founded by Marie Nancaro, and it's a business where she's utilising waste from some people and utilising those secondary materials to create a really innovative product. So let's meet Marie.
Hi, my name is Marion and Carol, and I am founder and owner of Titanic Denim. Titanic Denim is a sustainable fashion brand, and I'm here today in Castle Court in Belfast in the For Good Oxfam store to tell you about a wonderful collaboration between Oxfam and Titanic Denim. I'm here to launch a fantastic new range of sustainable denim bags. Fast fashion has a massive negative impact on our planet. It takes thousands of litres of water just to make one pair of jeans. This new collaboration between Titanic Denim and Oxfam aims to tackle climate change and the impacts of fast fashion on people and the planet. The handcrafted bags are suitable for all ages and each designer bag is totally unique. The linings of the bags have been created using reclaimed garments and the straps of the bags have been created using reclaimed seat belts. The medium-sized city bag is perfect for shopping and the smaller iPad-sized cross-body bag is ideal for everyday essentials or just as an eye-catching fashion accessory.
I don't have any shares in Titanic Denim. It was just a really good example that I'd heard of, and they've actually won. They won like an Innovative Business Award from Innovate UK in 2021. So, and it's just brilliant that to celebrate a local business doing really well. So, consumer behaviour, I just wanted to talk to you a wee bit about because it's getting into our psyches. We know that change in people's behaviour is going to be a massive part if we want to reduce our emissions, if we want to reduce our material footprint as well. So there's a survey, some research led by Ipsos, and they surveyed 15,000 people from across 11 countries. So a real good variety of people surveyed. And I just wanted to share a couple of insights from it. And this really asked people, what is driving you? What are the main factors that you consider whenever you're purchasing something? And this was looked at when you're purchasing clothing, when you're purchasing food, or when you're purchasing electrical devices. But you can broadly see people are still very much driven by price, quality, and close behind convenience. And I thought it was also quite interesting. So the environmental impact doesn't factor so much. The environmental reputation of a brand doesn't factor so much. When it comes to a recognised brand name for electrical devices, it's a lot more important. And I would say that's driven with Apple, Samsung, our big, I would say Apple is probably the big driver for that. So that was quite interesting. This was also, I found quite interesting, when you looked at then that the people who had responded to that survey and compared what impact, whether or not they would stop purchasing a product depending on if they found out the environmental reputation of a brand was quite poor. Across ages, it was clearly those aged between 18 to 34, nearly half of them said they would walk away and they wouldn't purchase that product. So obviously clearly a lot more important for people within that age category. Only 35% of those asked between the age of 45 and 54, would they walk away? Only 35% said that they wouldn't be purchasing it if they found out that the company wasn't environmentally responsible. And then it was only 28% for those aged 55 or above. So I just thought that's interesting. And obviously for businesses moving forward with a younger audience wanting more from brands, obviously any business will have to adapt and have to consider their sustainability and their environmental credentials if they're kind of wanting to stay competitive and appeal to that audience.
Is it possible, a survey like that you just put up, that young people, you're asking people, the young people are going to claim to be much more environmentally?
For sure, yeah.
Whereas the older folk are largely more true.
Maybe a bit of both. Maybe there's a bit more, they feel shamed into saying, yes, of course I would walk away. Because,
service,
yeah.
Where you ask when you get the answer that you
Of course. Absolutely. I'd say there's definitely an element of that. So for the next few minutes, I just want to, most of my work for the last 3 years has been on developing this draft circular economy strategy. So I want to walk you through some of kind of the headlines from it. At the start of the draft strategy, we've set this vision, and this came about from speaking to different stakeholders across different industries. And it's very, very high level. You know, the vision is that Northern Ireland will have an innovative, inclusive and competitive economy that is good for people, business and planet. So we're recognising we want a thriving economy, but we want it to be not at the detriment of the environment, where responsible production and consumption is at its core. So that's the vision. We then have included a target. If we're going back to what our evidence base said, our material footprint is double what it should be, or else double what is considered sustainable. So we have set a very ambitious target to reduce that material footprint by half by 2050. And we're out for consultation on this strategy at the minute, so you are very welcome to respond to it, and I'll leave you the link at the end. But it'll be interesting to see how people have responded to that. So far, out of the responses, people think we should be more ambitious. But I'm really curious to see what people think of that as we gather together all of the responses. Then within the strategy, at its very centre is these 12 proposals for change, and that's setting out a direction of travel. It's not actions, it's proposals for change, and they are high level. Each of them then fall under 5 policy goals. So this first policy goal is about collaborating for system change, because we know that the whole system needs to change, not just certain sectors of it. And so these first 3 proposals for change are really around collaborating to change people's behaviour, fostering collaboration across sectors and disciplines to create value. And then the third one relates to starting to collaborate on what we measure going forward, and given the climate action plan is going to be all around reducing emissions, we need to tally up our target on material footprint with the need to reduce our carbon footprint as well. And then these proposals for change coming under designing out waste are really looking at how can the government use its spending power to create demand for more sustainable businesses, and also then how do we go about supporting businesses to kind of adapt to different circular business models. The third policy goal is around managing our resources, and that is looking at how do we create spaces for people to share resources, whether that be online platforms like Facebook Marketplace as a platform, but there's more for businesses as well, and there's an organisation called International Synergies that do a lot of that facilitating of how one business can share its resources with another business. So that's at a business level and at a citizens level as well. Then goal 4 is around what we need to do to stimulate that system change, looking at having the right carrots and the right sticks, the funding that businesses are going to need to share the risk of investing in anything different, as well as making sure that there's the right regulations in place that force changes to take place. And that could be looking at waste regulations, or it could be looking at taxation on particular materials. Albeit I appreciate we don't have the control of that, but we can certainly influence it. And then the last policy goal is looking at investment in innovation, research and skills. These last 3 proposals recognise the need for us to do anything different. We need a massive amount of research to tell us how we need to do things differently. So investing in research to explore how more value can be retained from our resources. And then the latter 2 are looking at making sure that this rethinking and this different attitude towards resources is being taught in schools from an early age, as well as helping people who are currently in maybe high carbon or particular industries that are likely to be more impacted, making sure that they're supported to develop the right skills that they can survive and thrive in a changing world. So as I said, the consultation, the draft strategy is out for consultation at the minute. I'll put this slide up again at the end. You're very welcome to comment on it, and I'd love to hear your views. And this is just as we wrap up. Coming towards the end of this presentation. Just wanted to share a bit more about me and kind of how my circular journey has evolved. So I moved house, bought a house in Belfast coming up 2 years ago, and I challenged myself, given I was working in this, if I'm going to preach it, I got to live it as well. So I challenged myself to furnish my house with as much second-hand stuff as possible. Obviously I saved myself a fortune, but it was more the ethos of it that I wanted to see how easy was it. So I was able to get remanufactured white goods, a fridge and a washing machine. I had a friend donate a TV, and I was able to get a lot of my furniture off Facebook Marketplace. So it was convenient actually, and obviously it saved me a lot of money. My commute to work is normally, when in Belfast, with the Belfast bike, and I can cycle into work in under 10 minutes, which is fab. It's going to change when I move to Dromore. But anyway, Belfast bike is a great example of where you purchase the service and not the product. So I don't have to be responsible for the maintenance of the bike to make sure that the tires are pumped or that it works. I just pay £20 a year of a subscription to Belfast Bike, and then any of my journeys under half an hour are free. So that's a very circular business model. And then, as I was telling Susan, I'm getting married in May, and I set myself the challenge again of how do we plan a circular wedding. So we decided to not, well, first of all, I got a vintage engagement ring. And then we decided not to send out paper invites, but we set up a website to tell people all the information that they needed to know about our wedding. It's taken place in Fermanagh, so I've tried to, as much as possible, source local suppliers so that people aren't travelling from Belfast or from Cumber down to Fermanagh for the day for us. And then lastly, I was able to find a beautiful, this isn't my wedding dress, but I found a beautiful wedding dress online that had been worn by somebody else for a few hours when she got married in Barbados, and it is no different. That it looks like new, and I'm really excited, obviously, about wearing it. So I just thought that's just everyday examples to kind of hopefully bring the circular economy to life for you. So now over to you guys. I don't know where you would say you are in your journey. I would say a lot of you might not call it being circular, or that you're participating in the circular economy, but I would say any time you are being resource efficient, that is you being circular. So I've got some questions to prompt, I guess, to help you in your self-reflection. You may or not consider the environmental credentials whenever you're buying a product. You may or may not be reusing stuff. You may be a good one to reuse containers as well. Whether or not you buy anything secondhand before you automatically go to buy something new. Or whether or not you, and this is simple, getting your shoes repaired or items of clothing repaired, that should be in circular. Or have you looked at whether or not it would be possible to rent or to borrow a product as opposed to necessarily having to go out and to buy a new one. So I've also got some ideas for you because it can feel a bit overwhelming. I've just tried to simplify it. You could look at opportunities to car share. I don't know if there is like a website locally that of the opportunity of car sharing, but it'd be something to explore. Use public transport, obviously, where possible. Look and see. Facebook Marketplace is a brilliant place to go to, especially for furniture and antique pieces as well. I found some really beautiful furniture on Facebook Marketplace. You could look to join a repair cafe where you can go and learn skills of how to repair clothing or electrical devices or something else a tool that you're wanting to come and have repaired. Or if you're really handy yourself, you could look up setting up a repair cafe in Armagh. I don't know if there is one, but there's definitely a lot of resources online and I can put you in contact with how you would go about setting up a repair cafe if that was something you were thinking of doing. And then also you could calculate, and this is a good starter, calculate your own ecological footprint. There's a website there that I have provided, and I'm not no angel on this. I calculated my own, and when we talked about the Earth Overshoot Day, My personal Earth Overshoot Day was April, which is horrific given what I'm trying to do. But I was just honest in it. And then if everybody was to live like me, it would actually require over 3.5 Earths worth of, I don't know, I think it's around, actually, if you take 1 or 2 flights, that obviously bumps up your ecological footprint. But you can go, and it also advises you with some ways that you could consider reducing your ecological footprint. So lastly, I'm just going to leave you with some resources there if you're interested in this, find it interesting. There's a lot of really good books out there, but here's 3 that I found really helpful. And I realised I've been talking now for 55 minutes, so I'm going to sit down. That's the link to the consultation if you'd like to make any comments on it.